So when the U.S. jumped into World War I back in April 1917, it wasn't just about sending soldiers off to fight. No, it was about sending the entire nation to war. The country had to completely remake itself, and I mean almost overnight, from a quiet, peacetime society into a global military powerhouse. This is the incredible story of that transformation, the story of the American home front.
Okay, so let's really think about this for a second. How do you pull that off? That was the million-dollar question. The U.S. had a pretty small army at the time, and its economy was just chugging along on a peacetime footing. To get ready for a total modern war, well, that required a level of national coordination and control that America had literally never seen before. It was a massive, almost impossible task.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at just how huge this challenge was. Then, we'll see how the government stepped up to take control, how the whole country mobilized its food and its workers, and finally, we'll talk about the social pressures that kind of held the whole thing together. First up, let's talk about the sheer scale of what we're dealing with here. This wasn't just a matter of building some ships and training a few soldiers. Oh no, this was about fundamentally re-engineering the entire American society for one single purpose: winning the war. And this right here is a huge mindset shift. Suddenly, the factory worker, the farmer, the family planting a garden in their backyard, they all became absolutely essential parts of the American war machine. The line between the battlefront over in Europe and the home front right here, it basically just vanished.
So to meet a challenge this big, there was really only one institution powerful enough to coordinate the entire country: the federal government. And its role in American life was about to expand in ways that, frankly, were unimaginable just a few years earlier.
And what a shift it was. I mean, it's a night and day difference. Before the war, the government mostly kept its hands off the economy. That's the whole laissez-faire idea. But during the war, it became the central planner, the manager-in-chief of pretty much all of American industry and resources. This was a radical break from tradition.
To make this happen, Washington basically built a brand new set of super powerful federal agencies. You can think of these as the new command center for the American economy. They had the power to direct resources, control the railroads, and even manage the nation's entire food supply.
And the power these agencies had was immense. We're not talking about suggestions here. The War Industries Board could literally tell a steel mill, hey, stop making rails for passenger trains, you're now making artillery shells. They decided who got the steel, who got the coal, effectively pointing the entire industrial might of the nation toward one goal.
Okay, but it wasn't just about steel and coal. America had to feed its own massive army and help feed its starving allies in Europe. This turned American farms and even American kitchens into a whole new kind of battlefield.
This was the slogan, and it was brilliant. Championed by Herbert Hoover, the head of the Food Administration, the idea was so simple but so profound. Every single American citizen could directly help win the war just by changing what they ate. It created a direct link from a dinner table in Ohio to the trenches in France.
And here's how they did it. What's really interesting is that these weren't laws. They were calls for voluntary sacrifice. Things like meatless Mondays and wheatless Wednesdays helped save crucial supplies for the troops. And all over the country, victory gardens popped up in backyards and public parks, really hammering home the idea that everyone, and I mean everyone, was in this together. Now think about this. With millions of men getting drafted and shipped overseas, a giant problem popped up back home. Who was going to work in all those factories and fields? Well, this massive labor shortage was about to set off one of the biggest social shifts in American history. The answer came from two groups who had, for the most part, been shut out of industrial work. The war created this huge vacuum in the labor force, and it was filled by millions of women and African Americans who jumped at the chance for new economic opportunities. Just look at that number for a second. Over 1 million women took on jobs that had always been considered men's work. We're talking building airplanes, working on assembly lines, operating streetcars. This wasn't just about filling jobs. It was a direct challenge to the old ideas about a woman's place in society.
At the exact same time, the war kicked what we now call the Great Migration into high gear. Hundreds of thousands of African Americans packed up and left the rural South, heading for industrial jobs in cities like Chicago, Detroit, and New York. This was nothing short of a demographic earthquake, and it would reshape the cultural and political map of America forever.
But we have to be really clear here. This progress didn't come without serious friction. These new opportunities did not magically erase deep-seated racism and segregation. As different groups were suddenly competing for jobs and housing in crowded cities, social tensions just boiled over,
and in some cases led to incredibly violent race riots. So, with all these huge chaotic changes happening all at once, there was one final piece to the puzzle: managing public opinion. The government absolutely needed unwavering support for the war, and achieving that unity, well, it came at a price.
Suddenly, loyalty was everything. Buying war bonds wasn't just a financial decision. It became a public test of your patriotism. And criticizing the war or the government, that could get you labeled as disloyal. There was this intense pressure from your own community to conform, to prove you were a real American at every turn. This big push for unity didn't leave a lot of room for disagreement.
And this was the end result. You had this period of total war, where every little part of your life, what you ate, where you worked, even what you said, was directly tied to the military effort. The two had basically become one and the same.
So at the end of the day, the America that came out of World War I was a fundamentally different country from the one that went in. The war forged a nation with a much more powerful central government. It created new social and economic roles for women, set off huge demographic shifts with the Great Migration, and completely redefined the relationship between an ordinary citizen and the state.
Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. For the United States, the war itself only lasted about 19 months, but the changes it put into motion, that huge government, the social shifts, the new expectations we have of the state, they never really went away. The war ended, but in so many ways, the America it created is still the one we're living in today.